Stop. It's going now.
Hello, everybody. My name is Yoron Israel. I'm drummer, percussionist, band leader, educator, composer. Also, I'm also a music director and artistic director, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But welcome everybody to our alternative venues for jazz. So happy to be here with you, and just tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Chicago, Illinois, and I moved to New York around 1987. Lived there and played and toured with so many people through the years. And I moved to Boston um, to start my role as professor and chair of the percussion department in 2000. So that's kind of gives you a broad view, and I hope to talk to you a little bit about some specifics as to how I got involved in jazz, particularly. I see some of my friends joining. Good to see you, Poochie. Thank you for joining. Um, but interesting enough, I started. We were just talking a little earlier about Chicago, and I remember my first experience with music was actually in the church. I'm sure that's a common theme among musicians, but it was that aspect is very important to me. And now that I look back, it actually had a deeper impact than even I thought at that time when I was involved with it. But all I remember was, going to church with my parents and just being amazed at the music that was being produced. And as a child, I just wanted to be involved in some way. And so my first instrument was actually voice, because that is what was available to me. So that was the first instrument that I chose, and singing in the choir, and taking whatever coaching that was available to me at that time. And then as things progressed, I wind up playing piano and organ, because again, things shifted and that seat became available. I probably always had my eyes on the percussion and drums, but those seats weren't available yet. So I just kept going, and sooner or later I found my way to percussion. Um, but I grew up, taking piano lessons originally, and progress from there. Thank God I grew up at a time in Chicago where public schools still had music programs. And so that was a huge influence on my development, starting in junior high school, really. We had an award winning concert band and marching band and even a jazz band. And that really broadened my perspective of music. So I'm really thankful for that. Michelangelo Taylor, I will never forget my first band director. He was an amazing disciplinarian. So I learned a lot from him, and my colleagues, that many of them are still professional musicians to this day. I get a chance to play with a gentleman who we went to junior high school. He lives in the Boston area. His name is Andre Ward, one of my dear friends, and we go back way back to Michelle Clark Middle School in Chicago. That's why I always, as an educator, I always tell my students, to don't always appreciate the aspect of networking, because you never know, some of the same people that you network here in school will be some of the same people that might employ you 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So those collaborations, start at a certain point, but you never know where they may take you. So kind of moving on, but that was my introduction to music, and particularly jazz. I found jazz through kind of an unusual situation. I'll just tell this story quickly. I actually went bowling. I loved bowling even as a young kid growing up in Chicago. Winter sports was a thing, indoor sports. So my family was big into bowling. So there was a bowling alley actually in my neighborhood. I grew up on the west side of Chicago, and there would be live entertainment in the lounge area. And even though I was young, I couldn't go into the lounge, but the music was loud enough and you can kind of peek through the door and see the bands play. And I'll never forget my first experience hearing jazz was actually there. And I think, at that point, the bowling went by the wayside, and I had my eye on peeking through this door, watching that band. Later on, as time went on, some of the same musicians that actually was playing that gig, I wind up playing with a number of those gentlemen, and they became very important mentors of mine, namely a vibraphonist by the name of Miller Purdom, who actually was playing that night. I didn't realize his name, but later on we made the connection through our relationship of performing together, rehearsing together, and he was a very important mentor of mine. Um, Later on. So that's kind of my early some of my experience early on. Upon moving to New York, I went to undergraduate school in Chicago, and I finished that program at Roosevelt University. And as through my years in college, one of my passions was actually orchestral music. So I studied to become an orchestral percussionist. I played in Chicago Civic Orchestra. I played in many community orchestras, and I was headed in that direction, taking auditions for orchestras and the likes, and spent a lot of time, working on that repertoire throughout my college years. But at the same time, I was also playing in the jazz bands there, playing outside of school, making contacts, and I actually started my relationship with the great saxophonist Von Freeman, who also became a great person that hired me early on for performances, and I learned so much from him. And he, again, is another one of those people who I consider an important mentor. And it was interesting because through Von Freeman's band, I met a lot of the colleagues that I still play with from time to time, Kenny Davis and John Weber and Lonnie Placico, and these people came through that same lineage of being mentored and taught and playing with the likes of Von Freeman. So that was very important. Ironically, I play a lot with his son these days, Chico Freeman, and just kind of a interesting. In August, we're going to be performing at the Chicago Jazz Festival, August 31st, at the Chicago Jazz Festival. And we're talking about Chicago. I didn't know that was going to be my theme, but good. I also am a recording artist, and speaking of just staying with this theme of Chicago, a number of years ago, I actually recorded a record entitled Chicago, and it features my organ trio, Organic. On that recording is Larry Goldings, Joe Lovano, as well as on guitar. Speaking of relationships, somebody who we went to college together, Marvin Sewell, on guitar. And so on that recording, I recorded a number of my compositions dedicated to my upbringing in Chicago, but I also recorded an eclectic collection of Chicago people, musicians, and composers associated with Chicago, such as diverse as Jack DeJohnette, Clifford Jordan, Maurice White, and the likes. Just tried to really bring various elements to the music and try to come from diverse perspectives. But that's a recording called Chicago. And continuing that theme, I remember one of the people, when I got to New York, one of the first people that I played with, significant artists, was Mr. Ahmad Jamal. And I recorded about 3 recordings with Ahmad. and toured all over the world with him. I was with him for about 7 years. And we actually did a recording dedicated to Chicago as well. It's entitled Chicago Revisited. So you could find those, both my recording and Ahmad Jamal's recording. So through coming to New York, I had a chance to work with and record with a number of great artists, great musicians, including people like Kenny Burrell, um, people like Sonny Rollins and Horace Silver, some of my peers, Roy Hartgrove, Vanessa Rubin, and the list goes on and on. I mean, Jimmy Heath was a great, such an influential personality in my life. James Williams, another really important mentor to me as well. And it just makes me, in retrospect, as I'm involved in education, it just really, this whole aspect of mentorship is just so valuable. And that would be my advice to younger musicians coming under me, coming after us or after my generation is, don't avoid getting mentorship. A number of us who have been where you are have a chance to, could actually sow some really important seeds into your life. So never avoid this aspect of mentorship. And as a matter of fact, I would highly recommend that you seek mentorship. Seek some people who have done what you're trying to do, what you hope to do. And that's something that's been, when I look over my life, I could go on and on about, important musicians who have shared with me, who have inspired me, encouraged me. And the things, even, all these years later, those lessons that I learned, I'm now finding myself teaching those lessons and sharing that information with students that I have here at Berkeley, Berkeley College of Music, as well as other places that I teach and do clinics and do workshops at. Um, I think about people like Idris Muhammad. I'll never forget seeing Idris. I got a chance to know him quite well. And I remember, one thing that he spoke to me about. We were in an airport, both of us having, I think at the time, I was carrying drums around. I think I was on the road with Horace Silver and he was carrying a drum set, and we met each other at Newark Airport somehow. And one of the things I'll never forget that he told me, he said, continue to take care of your family, make your family a priority, and the Creator will always take care of you. Take care of your family, and the Creator will always provide and take care of you. So that has really been a mantra of mine, all these years later. And that had to be more than 20 years ago that he shared those words of wisdom with me. I think about also Slide Hampton, who I had a chance to play in the Slide Hampton Big Band, as well as the Dizzy Gillespie. I played with him with the Dizzy Gillespie All-Star Band. And I always respected him because of the way that he carried himself and his business sense for the music. And I remember sitting down with him once, and I was expecting him to go on and on about a long, to this question that I asked him. I expected a long answer, and he just simply said one sentence to me. He said, "All your answers will be answered in your practice room." I was like, what? I'm talking about, music business. Can you give me some tips about music business and how to record and how to publish music? And that was his answer to me. I'll never forget that as well. So that was kind of a sum total of my, I lived in New York for almost 20 years, about 20 years. And, and my choice actually to move from Chicago to New York was the fact that by the time I moved to New York, I had already played, I was very active on the local Chicago scene. I was recording, doing recordings. I was doing theater work. Of course, I was playing, in all the jazz clubs and playing jazz and playing other styles of music. So I had a very thorough background as well as classical music. So when I moved to New York, I had my vision and I was very methodic about how I moved. I was very I knew kind of exactly what I wanted to do, and I knew that I wanted to be a part of, the international jazz scene. So I tried to do everything. I with just having that vision was enough where I could kind of go through steps that I needed to go through to actually facilitate that. So I didn't I wasn't so interested in being a part of the New York local scene, and I knew that at that time that all the musicians that I wanted to play with, their tours at least started. Well, most of them still lived in the New York area, and whatever tours were happening were started and initiated, in the city of New York, as opposed to going to Nashville or going to LA. The people that I wanted to play with, I knew that they resided in the New York area, or they had, or their roots were in the New York area. So yeah, and as in the process, I became a band leader, and this is something that's really vital, and a lot of times it can be challenging, especially leading from the drum chair, from the percussion chair. But we all know that whether you're the leader or not, the drummer is the leader of the band. I always often tell my students that, but it's very true. Most people have often said, and I think there's a lot of truth to the fact that a band is only as good as the drummer. In terms of controlling dynamics, in terms of controlling the feel and the style of a given song. A lot of that rests on the drum seat. So from a musical standpoint, and also I'm a composer and arranger, moving from being an accompanist to a band leader from a musical standpoint was very seamless for me. But from a perception, from a business standpoint, it could be very challenging because at large, when you think of the leader of a band, you typically think of the people that are out up front, the saxophonists, the vocalists, and the like, as opposed to the rhythm section players. So but I actually started leading bands back in Chicago. And one of my initial people, one of the initial bands that I started playing with, or initial artists that I started playing with when I came to New York, was Kenny Burrell, who actually I met opening up my band, opening up for him at a jazz festival, at a major jazz festival in Chicago. I think it was called the South Shore um, Country Club Jazz Festival or something like that. But that was a jazz festival, and I was fortunate enough to have my band open up for Kenny Burrell, and that actually started my relationship with him. And when I moved to New York, he remembered me. I contacted him, and probably within that year, he called me for the first gig to actually perform with him. I'll never forget my first week in New York. Kenny was playing at the Village Vanguard with his guitar ensemble. So it was Kenny Burrell, Bobby Broom, Rodney Jones. The drummer was Victor Lewis. The bass player, I believe, was I can't remember who the bass player was. But that band was kind of hot at that time. They had did a one or two recordings that were very well received, and upon Kenny remembered me and actually invited me to sit in there at the Village Vanguard. Of course, it was left up to Mr. Victor Lewis if that would happen, but lo and behold, Victor agreed. And that was kind of my first time playing. That's certainly first time playing at the Village Vanguard, but I don't think I had played anywhere else, before that in New York. But just fate would have it, that Kenny Burrell would be playing that week when I arrived in 1987 in New York. And then, as they say, you know, the rest is history. I did about maybe 4 recordings with Mr. Burrell, and again toured all over the world with him. My first song that was recorded on a national level, on a national label, was actually done on Kenny Burrell's record, a record called Guiding Spirit. My recording, my song, he recorded my song called A Gift for You on that. That was actually a live recording, ironically, live at the Village Vanguard, a Guiding Spirit. And my composition is featured. One of my compositions is featured on that recording. So that relationship was very fruitful for me in a lot of different ways. So um, I've always, aside from being a band leader, my current recording that I have out now, I've recorded about, oh, including videos, educational videos. I think I'm on about my 12th recording. And my latest actual record is entitled New Dreams. I recorded it actually coming out of the pandemic. And the title kind of represents that, you know, after coming out such a time in history, you know, I kind of felt that the world and each one of us individually should have new aspirations, new dreams, new vision, new missions coming out of such, you know, those 2 years. So most of the recording, well, not most, some of the recording I actually did during the pandemic through technology. And fortunately, a lot of the main tracks, rhythm section tracks were done right before the shutdown happened. And then I was able to finish it and put it out right. Actually, the record came out September 2022. Yeah, so it's fairly new. No, 2021, sorry. So it's fairly new recording, and I'm real happy about the results of it. So definitely check it out, support it. It's available on all platforms. And all of my recordings are available on all platforms. Before that, that band is a band that I call Trio Plus. It's based around the piano, bass, drum trio, and we extended it. I'm real happy to Mr. Bill Pierce is featured on the record. A colleague of mine and great vocalist Nadelka Prescott is singing on that recording. My daughter, Yoron Israel, a budding vocalist in her own right. This is her debut on that record. Also a great violinist by the name of David is on that recording. And Kevin Harris, great pianist who resides here in the Boston area, also New York. And Michael Cochran, another New York bass musician, is also on the record. And on bass, Will is playing bass. So Will Slater is on bass. So that's the latest project. And currently I'm working on a new recording. I've just kind of been reworking a group that recorded a couple records before that, a band that I call High Standards. And typically that band has been a quartet on my previous recordings. But lately I did a concert a few months ago where I added and augmented the band. And I was so happy with the results that that's the band I'm going to be recording my next record with. The instrumentation is vocal. I'm real happy about some collaborations that I'm doing with a vocalist by the name of Lori Williams. So we have some projects coming up, which is going to culminate in the next recording. So keep your eye out for that. Other collaborators that I've been collaborating with, I would be remiss to not mention my ongoing collaboration. I've been playing in the Laszlo Gardoni trio, and sometimes he extends the trio for almost 20 years. And we have a new recording called Close Connection. He, myself, and bassist John Lockwood. really happy about that collaboration. It's when we play, it's very special because when you have been fortunate enough to have a relationship, a musical relationship and a personal relationship for over 20 years, just something magical happens when you get on the bandstand. So that's always fun to play and record with Mr. Laszlo Gardoni, and he works on a number of my projects as well. Um, Coming up, aside from my work as a band leader, I also, as a band leader with High Standards, I have some collaborations coming up with Bill Pierce. Many of you know who Bill is, one of the most prolific saxophonists, of our times. But in other projects that I have with other as an accompanist, outside of my work as a leader, as I mentioned, Chico Freeman. I'll be doing some dates with and touring with. Is a guitarist from the LA area, California, named Mimi Fox. Will be actually in New York at Dizzy's on December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And so we have some dates coming up throughout the rest of the year. Keep your eyes out for that. And yeah, so that's kind of let you know kind of what I'm doing in terms of performing. I also work a lot with vibraphonist Jay Hogarth. We recently did something in New York not long ago, and a few other people as well. Other projects that I do, I'm also the artistic director of a concert series called Jazz in the Sanctuary South Shore. This is a concert series that has been going on since 2017, and we do 2 concerts per year. I curate those, and they've been really just a great opportunity. And through the years, I've just featured so many great artists and so many great concerts. It's always a great time for those that come out. The last few of our concerts have been live streamed. The pandemic taught us how to do all that. So they have been live streamed, and you can also find them on YouTube. And our next one is on October 28th. One of the things about this program called Alternative Venues for Jazz, when I saw the title and Gail's work around this, I was like, wow, that's what I'm talking about, figuring out different ways of presenting the music. And that's what Jazz in the Sanctuary is all about, taking the music to a place where young people, all ages, feel comfortable coming into an environment that's typically, uplifting and has a certain kind of atmosphere, positive atmosphere, and then being able to present the music of jazz in that atmosphere. So I'm really excited about, when we have, which every concert we have young people, being a part of the audience. And actually in some of our upcoming concerts, I'm going to be featuring some of some young players in terms of opening up for the main artist in a number of our upcoming concerts. So that's something that's dear to my heart. I'm also a music director at a church here actually located in Brockton, Massachusetts, called Destiny Life Center International. And that's what I mean by this full circle thing. Remember, I told you guys at the beginning, I started, that was the start of my my introduction to music. And I'm happy to find myself kind of back in that capacity and actually being able to direct and to lead and to teach others about, not only about music, but how that all relates to the spiritual man. And so that's something that I'm very much involved with as well. I'm also I chair the percussion department here at Berklee College of Music, and I teach here as well as professor of percussion. And as a result, we have summer programs, again, thinking about the next generations. And I'm the director of the drums and percussion workshop. And actually, it's coming up this weekend. We do a weekend intensive of featuring, the world of drumming and the world of percussion. And it's very intense 3 days, and with visiting artists, and really excited about that. This is my 21st year of directing this program, so very excited about that as well. I'm also a clinician, and traveling and teaching all over the world. So thank you guys. I appreciate all of our Facebook users and those that are tuning in. And again, thank you for joining. And just continue to support music, because without you guys, there is no us. And when I say us, I mean the community of jazz musicians. So thank you again for joining, and thank you for Gail and all of those who put this program together, Alternative Venues for Jazz. Take care.